Hey everybody, welcome to the Connecting Neighbors podcast. My name is Chad Cleverly, and I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I started this podcast because I felt the desire to get to know my neighbors better, but also because I figured there was an opportunity for all of us to get to know each other better. I believe there is strength in unity. Each week, I'll be trying to interview a few of our neighbors and share those conversations here. I'm hopeful that in a small way, all of us can become stronger and more unified in our love for each other and in our shared pursuit of following Jesus Christ. All right, welcome to the Connecting Neighbors podcast. My guest tonight is Marilee Lishman.
Yes.
I do have to ask you a question real quick. So this will be a little bit of an off the cuff. It's pronounced Lishman, but it's when you see it, you want to say Leishman. Mm-hmm. Is that frustrating at times?
Honestly, I mean, it's nice when people say it the right way, but we don't really care. Like, I've just taken that from Brad, my husband. He's like, it doesn't matter. I don't care if they say it either way. It doesn't matter. Because back in the history of his family, they had a break off where some said Lishman and some said Leash, or they both said, no, it's this way, no, it's that way, and they broke off. So we're the Lishman side. But so
whatever works best, you kind of go with that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
That's funny. All right. So where does your story begin? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Washington State, on the West Coast, in the green area, all the beautiful tall trees. We moved around a lot, in my childhood and even throughout, up until I graduated high school. We were moving quite a bit. So I lived in a lot of different places in a few different towns and just moved around multiple times. So switching schools. We lived in California for a little bit. We lived in Provo for a little bit. And then we moved back to Washington until I was 12. And then I spent most of my teenage years in Utah and in a couple different cities in Utah. So
did you move because of your parents' employment? Or?
My dad, when my parents got married, my dad was still in high school, or not in high school. He was finishing college, and it took him 10 years to finish college. So it was kind of he just wasn't super settled. He was just always trying different things. He was in construction, so he would change jobs, and then so it was just, and then he would build our house wherever we were at. So we would literally live in a tent and trailer while we were built on the property while we were building a house.
That's
and then we live in a really nice house, and then we'd go move and live in another trailer and do it again. So it was kind of, my childhood was a little bit, maybe not the most stable as far as that goes, but my parents were stable and everything was good that way. But it was just a lot of changes, and I was completely happy with it. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I have a brother and then 2 younger sisters, and we always have so much fun playing together. We loved being outside, just building forts and playing in the trees, and so yeah, it was. I have fond memories of my childhood.
That's cool. While your dad was building these homes, did he engage you guys, come help? Or was it more I got this?
No, my parents, they tried to teach us to work hard. And it was funny because when I met my husband, his parents really valued hard work. I mean, a lot do. And they are really hard workers. And one time they had, I came with him while we were dating, early on, and I helped haul hay or whatever. And his family, Brad told me that he thinks that his parents were impressed with my ability to just dive in and just work. Yeah. And just whatever, because my parents had us help. And I remember, there was one house that I helped paint all the siding or stain all the siding, and they had it all lined up in this garage space. Well, actually he built it was a racquetball court inside the house.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
He had all these things lined up, and anyway, it was really pretty on the bay and everything there.
Wow.
But yeah, he's just, my parents kind of just built up everything that they had.
Yeah.
My dad came from a pretty rough background, and it really actually breaks my heart to think about what they went through. There was his parents like substance abuse and, divorce. And then my dad's father took his own life, and they were all separated, and then his mother remarried, and it was not a situation where my dad felt a lot of support. And I think especially with his older siblings, he was the youngest, so his older siblings really had to endure a lot. And so that's kind of, he made decisions to not like go the route that he saw was so destructive to like his whole family, and was made good decisions, and is a convert to the church, went on a mission, and married my mom, and they kind of just built up. He built from scratch what he thought could be a good life, and he's done amazing. So
that's amazing. So those tragedies in his life, he took those and used them to help him make better decisions and kind of propel himself forward. That's amazing. You really have two choices. You can go the same direction of what you've seen, the example that was set for you, or rise above. Yeah. Wow.
And I think a part of it, he says a lot of it was just pride. Like, I'm not going to,
I'm not doing that.
But yeah, I'm not going to be like them or whatever. But I think there was more to it than that. I mean, he could see the consequences of it. And so anyway, he's a good, I admire him a lot. But
so is, that was his dad's or your dad's father. Is his mom still around?
No, she passed away a while ago.
So you got to meet her.
Yeah. I knew her and his stepdad, who was basically, he felt like he was his dad, and he was a good guy, they had their unique issues that I think they had their struggles, Yeah. And I think sometimes people just have a hard time, with certain things and just overcoming, and it's difficult. Life is hard.
It is. It's really hard.
So
did it's you, the oldest, then your brother, and then two sisters. Do your siblings live around here, or are they still out of state?
Yeah, they do. They actually all live in Utah now. My sister, my one that's just younger than me, she lived in North Carolina for 5 years, and then they moved back. And so now we're all here.
That's cool. Are you guys still close? That's awesome.
Yes. We're very close.
And what about your parents? Are they here local now?
Yeah, they're an hour away, and it's awesome. I love it.
Where are they at?
They're in Lehigh.
Oh, nice. So yeah, that's close.
Yeah.
Lehigh's. I know this is gonna sound weird, but it's busy.
Yes.
It's busy.
That's true. That whole area down there, I'm like, whoa, the traffic.
So many people. It's insane how much it's grown. I remember when I was
like
a kid.
The Provo area and all that.
There used to be, a lot of land between each city. Now it's like one big massive city.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool that you guys are able to be close and still have strong relationships. So you're moving around a lot. You're having some pretty cool experiences helping your parents build homes. And at least for me, in my mind, I'm like, that'd be really cool. But was that hard from a friend perspective?
We were in Washington enough and kind of in surrounding areas that I had a good friend that I was friends with like the whole time, my friend Heidi. But when it came to schools, like I was probably never in the same school as her. I was used to being the new kid, I guess. And when it was up until my junior year of high school, it was never an issue for me. And I actually liked the change. Like I didn't mind it. Like it was fun. It was like, oh, where are we going to go? And it was like an adventure. When we moved to Utah, I was 12, 13. There was a friend, my friend Martha, who lived across the street. When I went to, we had kind of met, like they were like, oh, could you give her a ride to school or whatever? And then at school, like I remember being at lunch and nobody was sitting by me. And she is a year older than me. And she came and sat next to me, was like, hey, or she said, come sit by us. And I never forgot that moment because I was kind of in this like 7th, 8th grade awkward stage. And it was just really sweet of her too. And so I try to be that person for other people because I've been that person in various circumstances. And then my junior year, that was the hardest year to gain like girlfriends.
Yeah.
And when I moved from Roosevelt to Logan, all the girls had their own friends, and like the boys wanted to be my friend. But so I had boys that were my friends, but I never made any like good girlfriends, you know, like actual good friends, you know, until like almost the end of the school year. It took me a little bit to find some. So it was just like being in choir, that just being in a class where you're, and I wasn't super involved because we moved like last minute.
Yeah.
I didn't really get to try out for anything or be, I don't know. So that's just what happened that year. But I do try to be, I think about that. Like when I'm at church, if I see somebody, well, now I'm like giving it away.
No, go.
So now if somebody's like, if I sit by anybody, they're going to be like, oh, you think I'm lonely? You know, so you had to come sit by me. But no, I just look for somebody that's like not sitting by anybody else, or, you know, or like if I don't know them, I try to do that. You know, I'm sure I miss people, and some people I'm sure still have those experiences where they don't feel comfortable.
Well, I mean, look, everyone needs a friend.
Yeah.
Even if we think, oh, I've got my friends.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is we need people. We're built to need people. That's our Father in heaven designed us that way, I believe.
Yeah.
To need people and to have social constructs where we can help each other. So I think that's cool that you do that. Did you ever find it hard, like where you're like, you know, I'm more of an introvert, or maybe you're an extrovert? Was it hard, or did you find it easy to try to engage to get to know people, or was it a battle? Like, you know, I really don't want to do this.
I didn't really struggle too much. I'm sure there are people that do, but I'm usually pretty good. Like if somebody's friendly enough, I'm great after that. I'm usually okay.
If they're willing to have that,
if they're willing to be open to it or whatever. Yeah, I'm usually pretty open. I have a hard time actually keeping it surface level with people. So, and like the small talk, like I can do the small talk, but you know, I'm just kind of I don't know.
I actually admire that. I've got a couple of friends, they're an open book. It's like, are you sure you want to share that? And then there's other people, you can interact with them for months, and then you find out from someone else
that's something
they've gone through this, you know, big thing, and you're like, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't, you know, I didn't want to burden you or whatever. And it's like, hello.
Right.
I'm kind of over here thinking we're friends.
Well, maybe they're not as like self-focused as I am.
well, I don't.
And they're just thinking about other people. What about you? What about you? And I'm like, well, I want to hear about you, you know?
Yeah.
So.
That's interesting. So did you finish your junior or your senior year at the same high school that you were at?
No, I went to 3 different high schools. So I was in Roosevelt, in that little town of Roosevelt, was at Union High School, and then Mountain Crest. And then my senior year, I decided to go down to Tucson High School, Performing Arts High School. And because my grandparents were living down there at the time. So my mom was like, you could go live with your grandparents for the year and go to that school. She was sad when I left, but yeah, it was fun opportunity and fun thing to do.
I'm really glad you actually just brought that up.
Yeah.
Because I don't know a lot about you. But anyone that lives around here knows that you're very musically gifted. So I have wondered, and now that you just mentioned you went down to Tucson High School, I mean, it's built around that. Mm-hmm. So clearly you did that because you had a talent and you knew that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when did you discover you had a musical talent? And really kind of fall in love with the fact you had a musical talent?
Yeah. I mean, I think it ebbed and flowed as far as how it manifested and how much time and attention I gave it. But when I was like very young, like I just was singing ever since I was little, you know,
just like for fun.
Yeah. I would just sing, and my mom recognized that I liked to sing, and she recognized that I had a good voice for a child.
Wow, I don't mind her singing.
Right. Yeah, she was like, she became like a little stage. So anytime anybody would come over, she would have me sing for them, even from like a young age.
That's super cool.
And so I got used to kind of doing that. And, you know, I would act like I didn't like it, but I actually did.
again, Mom?
I like the
Really?
attention. I'm an oldest child. I don't know what it was, but yeah. So when I was little, I was doing that, and she had me like do plays and musicals, and signed me up for like a children's singing group, and I learned how to play the piano. She signed me up for lessons when I was 9. That came easily to me, not like a prodigy or anything like that, but like sight reading was something that clicked in my brain, like the understanding how the notes worked and where they were on the piano and all that stuff. I was like, oh, I get it. Like after a little bit, I was like, oh, that's easy to understand. And then like I kind of just worked through the books for, just like those method books for the first few years. And then I started teaching when I was young. Like I was like in middle school, and the neighbors would be like, hey, can you teach my kids? So I started teaching lessons when I was young. My first student was when I was 12, but that doesn't really count because I was like 11 or 12. She was my aunt. She was like, can you teach me piano lessons?
That's super cool.
But yeah.
Did teaching help you almost look at music a different way? Because it's not just how you perceive it. You now have to be able to explain it in a way that others get it too. Yeah,
I never thought about that, but yeah, I definitely think it does, because when I was teaching when I was little, I don't think I was a very good teacher, to be honest. I think those skills got a little bit better with time, but yeah, it's definitely, I think if I hadn't had those experiences, it wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have a broader perspective, I guess, of music that
So do your siblings are they musically talented as well, or?
They all have some, but they never, they kind of all tried to take lessons but didn't really, it wasn't the same experience for them as me. And so they were more into sports.
Okay.
They were all sporty, and my dad was very athletic and, taught wrestling and stuff. And so my siblings all kind of focus more in those areas. And like I do have a sister that plays a little bit, and both of them sing a little bit, like in choir, but they never really like got into it. And ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to be a singer when I grew up. Like that was what I wanted to be when I grew up. But then it kind of changed as I got older. But now I'm like, that's what I'm still doing, and that's what I want to do. Like, so anyway.
when did you start like writing songs and like arranging music?
Yeah, that was when I was a junior in high school. Out in Mountain Crest, I think there was at the beginning of the school year, there was like a little performance or whatever, and a high school band played, and they like wrote their own songs, and I was like, I could do that. Sometimes for me, it takes seeing somebody else do something or somebody telling me that I could do it for me to realize that I could do something. And I'm like, well, why didn't I think of that? But sometimes it's just, I don't know, it just takes a little bit for me sometimes. So I wrote some songs, and then I performed at like our school talent show. And I just remember I did this song that I had written. The whole like auditorium stood up after and gave me like a standing ovation, and was like, super cool. I was like, what? Like, it was just like a cool moment. But it was like, I'm sure the song isn't like that amazing, but it was like a little love song, and anyway, so it was just a fun moment in my life. But yeah, so I did a little bit of that, but it was interesting because I had these like different, like, I could play the piano and I could sing, but I would also do dancing. So I was in like the drill team, and I remember and I would try to do play in musicals or whatever. And I did like cross country, and so I dabbled in different things.
Wow, yeah.
And kind of looking back, I'm like, it kind of would have been nice if I was just like a little more focused on my best skills. Yeah. In Roosevelt, I was taken from a teacher, and she was like, you're at the level where you should be practicing an hour a day. And I had done a few competitions, and I think she wanted me, to do more competition stuff. I ended up moving probably a year later, but but then I was like, you know what? I'm too busy. Once she said you have to do an hour a day, I was like, that sounds too long. And then when I went to college and actually studied piano pedagogy, I'm like, I wish I wouldn't have quit piano lessons, and because I'm a little bit behind some of these other people who have been doing competitions like the last 4 or 5 years.
And they probably practiced
and they were
multiple
practicing
hours a day.
Yeah. And in college I had to practice 3 hours a day.
Wow.
That was the requirement. And then the performance majors were practicing 5 hours a day. But I was the pedagogy emphasis.
I don't even know what that is.
Which is teaching.
Okay.
So was my emphasis. So you don't have to be as performance driven. But I would practice, 3 hours a day during college. But I look back at that and go, and I could have focused more on my voice and focused more on the songwriting, which if you bring it all to now, what I'm doing, I'm bringing them all together.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I did, it took me a while to figure that out.
So I've got like 1,000 questions in my head. So you leave Cache Valley and Paradise.
Yeah.
Quite literally.
It is, yeah.
Kind of where, I guess it's Hiram, technically, where Mountain Crest is. But I love Cache Valley. It's
we
amazing.
were in Providence, but yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you go down to Tucson. Was the curriculum
it was
piano and
there's
all
no
of that?
Yeah. I mean, you had some
or
general
is it more
classes.
Performing?
You had like some people were into dance, some people were really into drama, some people were really into singing, and some people were into piano or whatever. I felt like their strength was really the drama and kind of the singing, the performance area like that. That was probably the best.
And they've got that beautiful outdoor theater that's unreal.
Yes. And I got to perform on there and also be in like their summer show. And so it was a fun experience. I look back and I'm like, oh,
So you went in, when you went to college, you went into music. It sounds like.
I did. I did. Well, I didn't know what to do the first year. And
where did you go?
I went to Utah State.
Okay. So you went back up to Logan.
Chose to go to Utah State because I made the Sunburst Singers, which was like their singing group for Utah State, which they did like a Glenn Miller show, and it was around for I don't know how many years, but my year was the last year before the school decided to drop that whole program.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
it was kind of a big thing. But so it was sad, but I was involved with that, and it was so much fun.
When we were up there, I remember, what was his name? Michael Ballum.
Uh-huh.
Was he still involved in the music program when you were there?
I think he was, but I wasn't really in that. I did piano pedagogy, and then I was also in the that group, and I actually dropped out for a little bit because I had some issues with my being like doing well in school and struggling, and after Sunburst ended, so my first year was great, and then the next year was kind of flailing a little bit, and then I dropped out of school, and I was still teaching and doing lots of things, and then finally kind of got my act together, and I went back to school, but I wasn't able to ever finish, so I was doing like a piano pedagogy program, and I basically got like the certificate thing for piano pedagogy, but then during that time I met Brad and married him, and then we moved, and so that's kind of, yeah. So
it took going to Utah State to meet Brad.
Yeah.
So that's where he was studying as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was it in a class? In the singles ward? The student ward?
No, it was, there's a couple of reasons why I was able to meet Brad. Like, because of Sunburst Singers, there were some people in there that were involved with Bear Lake Pickleville Playhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
I've been to a show there. It's amazing.
One of the daughters of like the family that runs it and stuff was in Sunburst with me, and so they were like, you should come up and help be in a show and play the piano for one of the shows. And so I did that, and Brad got off his mission, and they were like, oh, you should go listen to one of the songs that Marilee wrote, like, go and get your guitar. And because he was up hanging out with his friends, because his best friend was the friend that was in Sunburst, older brother. And so so he always would go up to and hang out at the cabin, and like, they always have fun at Bear Lake. And so after the show one day, that's when I met him. So yeah. But we didn't really, like, we were like doing stuff we were like hitting it off with music, but we didn't really go deeper or like really do much. We went on like a couple dates, and then nothing really ever happened after that. And then a year later, a good family friend who lived in the area was like, you should start a band because my husband could play the drums for you in the band, and I want a band at my mini golf course, that we have on the weekends, and that would be fun, and
so
my husband Steve, he plays the drums, so can you get a band together? And I'm like, okay, sure. I never even thought that I could do that until she was like, you could totally do this.
Yeah.
So I called up Brad because I knew he played the guitar, and we had kind of like worked on a song together before. So I called him up and I was like, hey, you want to be in a band with me? And he was like, sure. So if it weren't for Sunburst and then her saying, hey, start this band, like I wouldn't have gotten together with Brad, because that's how we fell in love, was doing the band together. He helped me like find our violinist and our bass player, and then and we worked on songs together, and eventually the songs that we were working on, we started like writing songs that were like about each other.
Did you know that at the time?
Oh yeah.
That's so funny.
I mean, it was cute. It was kind of like this little, thing, like, oh, I think it's about you. And then, but it was really fun because I had moved back home like that same year to live with my family. The kind of when I was struggling a little bit with things and with school, and I was like, I need to get myself together. I was like, this is the time for my preparation. Like, I'm going to prepare to be married in the temple right now and be ready for that, and like get spiritually really honed in. And so that's like what I was doing before I called Brad for the band.
Yeah.
So I was kind of getting myself prepared, and it was really fun for my family because we were at our house a lot practicing like with the band, and they really got to know Brad. Yeah. And it was just so fun for the whole family because they were all younger and just loved, being a part of watching our love like develop.
I love stories like that.
Yeah.
Because at the time we don't see our Father in Heaven's hand in the whole thing, guiding it, you thinking, hey, I've got to get myself together.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that had far-reaching benefits. Mm-hmm. But for me sitting here, it feels like part of that was also getting ready for Brad. Mm-hmm. And Brad was probably doing the same thing, and I'll probably hear about that from him later. But that's super cool. And that probably made it super simple for your family to kind of, bring it in. Yeah, you're one of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They all just loved him. Yeah.
How long were you guys, once you had made that phone call and said, hey, let's do this band?
Yeah. It was about a year later, I think, that we got married. But I know we dated for like maybe 6 months or something, like when we actually started dating, but we'd known each other a while. So we'd known each other for like a couple of years, but yeah. But
the formal part was roughly 6 months, and then he was like, all right.
Yeah. And then we got engaged, we got married pretty quick, once we got engaged. So within like 3 months. So yeah, it was great.
So after you got married, did you stay in Logan for a little while, or did you finish school and say, let's...
Yeah, so we got married, and that's when I was like, okay, going back to school. I was 21, he was 23, and so I was much better student after I was married. And
a little less distracted.
Yeah, I was a little more just like focused, and it was good. Yeah, we were there for 3 years. Brad did internships in California for, a couple of summers. So we spent some summers there in out in the hot China Lake Ridgecrest area, just by like Death Valley.
Oh yeah.
And because he had some internships out there as an engineer. So he got a job offer to go to Ridgecrest or Tucson. Tucson was like, Ridgecrest is a teeny little town. Tucson was like 1 million people. And it was, we wanted to go to Tucson.
Tucson's the University of Arizona, right?
Yeah.
And it's further north where Arizona State is, right?
It's it's 2 hours south of Phoenix.
Okay.
So it's right by the border of Mexico. It's like a half hour away from Mexico. We moved down there, and we had our first baby right after we moved there, within like a month. So that was a little scramble, get that all together with the doctors and stuff. But so it was great. It was beautiful. Yeah.
And so that's your daughter, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She is almost 18 now.
Man.
Yeah.
They grow fast, huh?
I know.
So you're down there, and at that point he was working. It was no longer school, right?
Right.
Okay, so he's working.
He did get a master's, so that's why it took a little. He did like a concurrent extra year master's.
Yeah.
Which was such a nice thing that they had to offer. So you could only do it. You could do it in just one extra year.
So she's born. You're down there. He's working, and you're feeling like, hey, this is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're established.
Mm-hmm.
Did you?
I was really into just like trying to be the best wife and mother that I could be. And I started teaching lessons down there, got some piano students and stuff. So, yeah.
At that point, did you have any family down there around here, or was it just you guys?
We didn't have any family nearby. So they were all in Utah and Idaho.
So did you feel like you made friends like with people in the ward, or was it?
Yeah.
I've always wondered because, we got married and we've been here like the whole time, surrounded by family. And I've always wondered, what's that like? I mean, you're not near people that you know.
Wherever you're going to be, you have to choose to love it.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of being miserable? And so we always tried to be positive and really just enjoyed it there, and enjoyed the weather. We tried to make the most out of it, because we were like, oh, it's really nice during the whole 9 months of the school year, what I mean? And so we would just enjoy it and make the most of it. But and we had a lot of friends. We felt like we had to learn, to be independent because we didn't have somebody that we could call or whatever and just figure things out. And I think I relied on my husband a lot to do a lot of we relied on each other. Cause I did a lot too, but, so it was good. It wasn't until it wasn't. Just kidding.
Well,
until we moved back up here, and until it was time to, we're like, no, we need to move back up there.
So how long were you down there?
16 years.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting
it was the longest I ever lived anywhere.
Yeah. Wow.
By far.
So when you say it was really good until it wasn't.
Well, because I started to feel the contrast of not being around family. So now I need to go into the story basically of my children. So we had Leia, and then we had Eli a couple of years later, and they were less than 2 years apart. And I'm like, whew, this is I was ready to have my second baby. But then when I had him, I was like, whoa, this is a lot of work. Cause I didn't realize how how crazy my oldest child would be.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was funny because she was a lot of my friends would have kids that would just sit there and hang out and do stuff. She was not like that. No.
Yeah, she was active.
She was very, very active, very, 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 very curious, very, very creative, very, very always busy. And, sometimes very independent and defiant at times. And so I just was like, okay, how do I do this? So anyway, so that was a little learning process. And it's funny because I look back and I'm struggling so much with my first baby. This is so hard. I don't know how to, I have to take care of another child 24/7. I'm like, oh my goodness.
How am I going to do it?
And then with my third child, I was like, the baby thing is easy. This is the easy part. And when I first had my first, I was so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But it's just funny the process that you go through, and you become a little less selfish over time. But
kids,
yes, that's what
our father never knew what he was doing.
Yeah, they teach us so much about real love. And anyway, so then we had Eli, and then Eli started when he was 18 months old, he started showing things that we were a little bit concerned about. We're well, he seemed like his balance doesn't seem as good as some of the other kids his age. And then, when he's getting closer to 2, his speech isn't he doesn't have a lot of words like some of the other kids his age. And, everybody just told us I didn't talk till I was 4. My other relative didn't, whatever. And, so they would be it kind of trying to calm us, but it was almost they were that the way I felt was not validating my concerns.
Your concerns.
That was kind of a process over the next few years of going, something's wrong. Like, but everyone's kind of like, well, Then when his eyes started like crossing suddenly, and then we were a little worried about his comprehension. Like, okay, is he understanding? Like, it doesn't seem like he understands as well as other kids his age. So with that and all those things combined, we were like, well, does he have like a tumor or something that's like in his brain that's affecting some of these things? Or we didn't really know what to think.
So you're having these concerns.
Yeah.
When you're going to the doctor for like well checkups, and did they notice anything?
I mean, it's so mild at that stage that it's like, really, it could be nothing. And so I think a lot of times doctors generally try to just, they see too many hysterical parents. Yeah. I don't know. And so they're like, just, it's okay. It's everything's, I'm sure that if you just go to therapy and you go do this, and we did do some like genetic testing and stuff, but it was never conclusive. In Tucson, there wasn't really it was kind of traveling from Phoenix. Yeah. Anyway, so there's not a lot of pediatric geneticists around. Over that time, I decided to focus really on just all the therapies with him and doing whatever I could. And then in the meantime, during all of that, we had our third child. And, as our third child is getting older, I'm starting to get concerned about him too, when he's getting closer to 2 years old. And finally, I'm talking to a neurologist going, I think that maybe my youngest might have something similar. And she's like, let's get you over to Phoenix Children's and get you to this doctor. And everything was just taking a long time.
So for the first couple of months of your boys' lives, they were normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, there was no issues.
By all accounts, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So until they were like 18 months.
And that's when it started to...
Or maybe a year, you might, if you were really observant, but nothing significant. So, and it was so gradual. I would look back and I started tracking things. I started writing things down. Like, even starting then, I was like writing down, okay, here's what he can do. Here's all the words he can say. And just like little things. And then I would look back and go, he can't do those things anymore. Like some of those things that he, like 6 months ago.
So it was like a regression.
So I would like look back. Yeah. And he was like slowly regressing. And it really was, it seemed like he peaked at like 18 months to 2 years, with this. I'm sure that he could still learn some things after that. But as far as like where the regression started happening. Yeah. So we had our 3 children. We finally get over to Phoenix Children's, and after going to like doing this other like whole genome sequencing thing with this other doctor who was like, well, it's going to take us a while to look through everything. And then finally going to the right person, the biochemical geneticist at Phoenix Children's, who was like, let me send in this sample and get you tested. And it's like, so then he calls me because I live 2 hours away at my house. I'm actually alone because Brad had taken the kids down a walk. And he's like, I'm sorry to have to tell you this over the phone, but your children have a disease called GM1 gangliosidosis. And I'm like, okay, let me get something to write this down with. How do you spell it? Like, what is that? And so he kind of explained to me like what it is medically, like what the process is. And I didn't really fully understand. And then he's like, I'm like, what does that actually mean? And he's like, well, it's not likely that your children are going to live to be adults, to adulthood. And that kind of was like dropping a bomb on me. Like, yeah. What? I didn't think it was like anything like that, and it was funny because my husband didn't seem as surprised as I was. He's more of like go to the worst case scenario kind of worrier kind of guy. And I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to help this child and just be positive and just work through this. I'm sure it'll be fine. And then I was like, whoa, okay. So that was a shocker to me. And so then over the next, within like a year of being diagnosed, he, really within that year, he lost his ability to walk on his own. He, and
this is your oldest.
This is my oldest boy, which is my second oldest, but he had to get a feeding tube because he was struggling more with his swallowing. And then just the feeding tube was good because before that, I mean, without that, he wouldn't have survived much longer than that year.
Because he couldn't eat on his own.
Yeah, he couldn't eat, and there wasn't a cure for this disease. There wasn't any, any good treatment or anything. It's a neurologic disease, and my husband and I are both carriers of it. And of course, we have no idea, It's just like a 1 in 4 chance every time you have a child. So if you get the 2 bad copies, right, your child's going to have it. So that was kind of like a thing that was like hanging over me, of like, okay, my children are going to die at some point in the future. I have no idea what that's going to look like. It's a rare disease. So it's a really rare disease, although it's in a family of like 50 other really rare diseases. So there's a lot of them. They all kind of manifest a little bit differently, and there's some different symptoms and things, but probably a lot of generalities. But I didn't know what that was going to look like, and I couldn't find a lot of information. So for me, like my way of coping with that was, I guess, besides becoming a control freak a little bit and having to kind of work on that and work through that, because I'm like, oh, well, I can't control this. Let me try to control everything else.
Yeah.
And so I really had to try to like work through that. But I sought out anything that could help me to learn how to like manage it, to learn how to manage my emotions, to learn how to live more in peace and to kind of cope with it. And the gospel, of course, was essential, Once that happened, I decided and I chose to believe that God wasn't doing this to punish us, that he was allowing this to happen. I felt like it was really important to understand who God is and the nature of God. And so, because I had some neighbors that came to me, oh, how could, like, if there's a God, like, how could he let something like this happen? Like, children suffering like this. And so that's when it kind of was like, what do I think about this? What do I believe about this? And I like wrote a blog post and really articulated what I believed about it. That helped me to kind of base my whole view of it, I guess, and how I was going to approach it. And I wasn't angry or bitter about it, although at times it was like hard sometimes, to deal with it. I'm sure there was times where I was bitter about certain things, but over those next years, it was a struggle. There was a lot of good, and there was a lot of good resources there that we had. We were so happy about the respite care providers, our doctors, and all the different people that we kind of formed our tribe and our community around us that to support us, because we knew we needed it. And they became like family to us, like so close to us. And all the people at the schools were so great.
Just your ward, or like all of your neighborhood? Yeah,
the whole community of like the medical community, respite care providers that were hired, that were not members of the church, but became totally like family to us because they were in our home a lot. Yeah. The schools that we became close to, a lot of people in the schools and some of their classmates that were like some really special kids that loved our children, and then the people in our ward and in our neighbors, such great neighbors, such great people in our ward. But a lot of times too, it was hard too, like we were in the thick of it. Like there was like some crisis moments, happening, and it was a day in, day out, like you're constantly, they required a lot of care, and it was different. Like my oldest daughter, and so she required a lot of energy too, but then sometimes she would act out to get attention, so you're kind of dealing with that. And then you've got the one who's really starting to regress and who's needing he's needing medications, and he's needing like constant daily care, needing to be fed, needing to be changed, you need to be like all day, and you're lifting him and you're taking care of him. And then the younger one, who's not quite to that point yet, but he's not like another child. Like he still can't do a lot of himself or entertain himself very well. And so he's needing other things. He's climbing on you the whole time, Yeah. And so it was it was heart-wrenching. It was like heavy at times. And it was some of the most painful moments and dark moments, but also at the exact same time, like the most grace and beauty too, where I'm like, I can get what real suffering looks and feels like. I never knew that, because I had such a blessed life. So then it kind of expanded my heart to what actual suffering that other people might have.
Yeah.
And when that I can feel like I can now understand to some extent. Yeah.
So I've got a lot of questions, but formulating them is what's interesting for me right now. Do you feel like through this experience, you were able to understand the atonement in a way? Because a lot of people growing up, they think the atonement is, I made a mistake, it's going to help me repent. But the atonement is infinite, covers everything. The pain that you were feeling, the Savior's felt it. Help me understand that process when you started to really learn, okay, he gets this. He knows what I'm dealing with, and he can help me.
One of the hardest experiences I had was when my son, Eli, was getting towards the end of his life. Like, he was suffering so much that, we had to choose, because we were feeding him with the feeding tube. We had to choose to stop feeding him with the feeding tube and stop giving him food and water. That's what we chose to do in that situation, because, honestly, he really wasn't tolerating the food well. He wasn't sleeping well. He was agitated all the time. He was uncomfortable all the time. And his body really seemed to, when I lowered the amount, I was like, whoa, he's calm now, And so I kept experimenting with that. He wasn't choking and spitting up all the time. And so, so that was a really difficult decision. And that was really hard for me as a mother. That's what you do. As a mother, you nurture, you feed your children, and to have to just choose to stop and feel like you're basically, he starved to death. His heart was still pretty strong. It was all the other stuff that was not working. And so his body to the bitter end, we had to watch him go through the process of dying over weeks. And, and so that was, something that I had never seen, death before. And it was scary to me what it looked like and everything and what was going to happen. And it was during COVID. There wasn't as much support as there had been before, with nurses coming, and I felt like I was kind of doing a lot of it on my own. And so as far as understanding, I guess, the Savior better, the sacrifice that he went through to take upon our sins and to die on the cross, and Heavenly Father kind of giving up his son, and Abraham, sacrificing his son, or almost sacrificing his son. To me, when Eli passed away and I basically was like, here's my child, I'm trusting you and I'm handing my child over, that felt like a big sacrifice to me. I felt like to keep my faith and to trust and it was my Abrahamic sacrifice, I guess. It wasn't something I really had a choice, but I did feel like I was choosing to, because I could have kept him alive. We could have kept him alive longer. It wouldn't have been pretty.
Yeah.
But we could have just kept, holding it out as long as we possibly could. Anyway, it's a really personal and sensitive thing, and it's a hard thing that other parents have to go through sometimes. But it was in those moments of I just us trying to endure that and be strong, and me helping him through that every second of it to the bitter end. That was something that I felt like, okay, we did it. We accomplished this thing. So anyway, that's kind of how I relate to the Savior, I guess, is like, yeah, in just some small little way. When my son passed away, it was right when the sun was rising, and it was a spiritual moment, you know. So anyway, it was a lot of hard and scary and dark, and then, but also very spiritual. There were a lot of times where I didn't feel alone even when I was alone.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I think the Lord is just super gracious.